Welcome to our AI Unplugged Without Borders video podcast series, part of the Transatlantic AI Exchange. We are kicking off a new era of knowledge sharing with our move to video podcasts. Here, you will get to hear from experts in a more relaxed setup, diving into the nuts and bolts of deep tech and artificial intelligence. This shift to a more visual and flexible format means that you can tune into whenever and wherever it suits you best, bringing the world of AI to life through dynamic storytelling. Get ready for a lineup of fascinating talks on deep tech and AI seen through the lens of top minds across the ecosystem. Catch you on the next episodes of the Transatlantic AI Exchange podcast. Today, I'm chatting with Fabian Westerheide in Berlin, Germany. His ambitious goal is to make Europe a strong and sovereign player in the global AI ecosystem. As an investor, entrepreneur, and networker in the field of AI, he has accompanied and shaped countless companies and institutions on their way into the future of AI. Now, Fabian is the founder and CEO of AI for Humans GmbH, advising numerous government institutions and Fortune 500 companies. Together with his wife, he hosts the annual Rise of AI conference in Berlin, one of the most recognized industry gathering for key players in the German AI ecosystem. He's a founding member of the AI Fund and has been privately investing in artificial intelligence companies for the family holding company's investment arm called Argard Capital since 2014. An author of the book, The AI Nations, Fabian Westerheide combines his rich expertise with a unique perspective to shed light on the role of AI in the future and its potential impact on society, business, and politics. Now, I am your host, Thomas Neubert. I am born and raised as well in Germany. I'm a longtime entrepreneur living in Silicon Valley for over 33 years, and I am the founder of the Transatlantic AI Exchange. Fabian, good morning, good evening to you. You are in Berlin, Germany. I want to thank you very much to take your time to attend our new podcast series from the Transatlantic AI Exchange. We called it the AI Unplugged Without Borders. And the objective for the podcast is to use some key conversations that we have about AI to better understand the two AI activities that are happening in North America and in Europe, particularly now here in Germany. But if you have some sense or influences about what is happening in Europe, we can discuss that during the next roughly 40 minutes. So welcome to the session. And maybe as a quick intro, I already told the audience a little bit about yourself for the last few minutes, but in your own words, could you explain to you a little bit who you are, why and how are you passionate about AI, and to give us also a glimpse of your phenomenal upcoming conference, the Rise of AI in Berlin?
Well, Thomas, thank you very much for the invitation, and welcome to everyone who's listening today and has tuned in. Well, my name is Fabian Westerheide. I'm an entrepreneur, investor, multiplicator, network in the space of artificial intelligence for over a decade. I have a background in business. I've studied in the United States, but also Switzerland and Germany. I've done my high school in the United States. That's why I like to be on this podcast, because I've been on both sides of the Atlantic as well. And my core passion is to make Europe a strong hub for AI, because I truly believe AI is the key technology of our generation. And those who own and control AI, they control the world at the end. And currently we're in a space where, it's the United States the number one, China's the number two, and Europe could be strong number three, but it's not. And I think we'll later discuss this. So to build an ecosystem, I have started the Rise of AI conference 8 years ago. It was first a meetup where we spoke about the singularity and posthumanism, and then it merged to a B2B conference at the intersection of policies, makers, society, and business over the years. And today we have a very private event with 200 people only. The rest is in the streams, a couple of thousands, where we bring every year together, let's say, the two key people in the German-speaking but also international context of AI. So we have several members of German government, but we also have members of the Finnish government and the French government. We have Secretary of States, we have people from European Parliament, and then we have the investors, the multiplicators, the entrepreneurs, the researchers, everyone who's shaping AI. And my goal is together with my wife, bring them together for a day, set the topic, set the agenda, and then let the energy, the brains, and the ideas flow.
Thanks for that introduction to the Rise of AI, which is happening in May. If I'm correct, May 17, is it correct?
May 15.
15, okay, sorry. So I was invited by you to last year's conference. It was my first conference. I was literally impressed about the content and the small but really high caliber of people that you had gathered, which was one of the reasons why I was motivated to actually have this session today so that we can actually publish it before the conference takes place. I really believe, and I have been in Silicon Valley for actually most of my life, half of my life, I should say, as a German. But this conference in Germany is very unique. And for anybody who has an interest in AI, no matter where you sit within the ecosystem, it is absolutely valuable to participate if you still can. And if not, then I can only encourage people to dial in remotely because the speakers and the content is absolutely incredible. So I hope for the audience that this gives you a motivation to check it out on the website. I may add, and this is also for other countries in Europe that I'm engaged with, that the Germans have, or in this case, Fabian with the conference has done this for quite a long time already. This has not been the first conference of the Rise of AI. But the interesting thing is, I can only encourage other countries in Europe to look at the structural program that has been put in place in Germany. The interesting thing is, I thought it was unique that you called it the KI Monat Mai, the month of May, which is around artificial intelligence to translate it. And what I really think is unique is the collaboration between many entities in Germany from north to south to east to west who are putting networking events and conferences together in the month of May all around AI. Last year, I was invited to 4 or 6 of these events. And I must say, as a country, as a state, it was phenomenal. And I have told the story to many other countries that I'm working with here in Silicon Valley, European countries. And maybe, they have the motivation to do something similar. So with that in mind, let's maybe start to ask a few questions. I only have a few questions, but some of them are really close to my heart. But let me just start with a little bit, not that much because it has been covered a lot, but it comes up in many conversations here. And that is the impact of the European AI Act for the AI ecosystem, not just in Europe, but also globally. I just participated in a workshop a few days ago at a law firm here in Silicon Valley. And all the players, they talked about the AI Act. And everybody gives the Europeans the credit, not the first time, that they are ahead when it comes to regulations and thinking about privacy, data privacy, stuff like that. So where do you see currently the AI Act is heading? Because you have many influential speakers at your conference who actually participated in the conversations in Europe. So you must have very good insights.
So, spoiler, I have published a book. It's called die KI-Nation, translated the AI nation, where I literally face the questions, what can Germany and Europe do in the times of AI, and how can we compete with the US? So from my perspective, and this is my personal opinion, the EU AI Act is like a red flag act. So it will slow down our ecosystem, mainly because we are like the geek in the first row who wants to overachieve. So it will lead on the one hand for corporates to embrace AI more because it's now compliant, they have rules, they have norms, they can work with this. For startups, it will slow them down because you now need to comply, and the compliance, it's long. It's for a large corporation, it doesn't matter. For Google, Amazon, it doesn't matter either. But for the smaller companies, it will be a disadvantage. Short term. It will take some time until other hubs will emerge too, and will have laws too, and then it's just a question of like which law is slower or faster and which will be more adapting. From society perspective, I like that we have a law. I lobbied 10 years for a law like this. Not how it is written, because it was not written by technical people, it was written by lawyers. Yeah. And if lawyers want to regulate technology, it will never end good. Nevertheless, the impact will be that we as European nation have set now standards and have written down what we think will be good and bad AI. And other nations will comply with it because they want to do business in Europe. There is no large company which will stop doing business in Europe. Maybe as a second market, they will not enter Germany or Europe right away because it takes a little bit of time to adapt. But Google will continue, and Google will comply, and Facebook will comply, and Instagram will comply, and TikTok will comply. And honestly, it will be good if TikTok has to comply because I'm highly curious to see how they work, what data they collect, and they have to write it down, they have to comply with authorities, and someone will be there and checking their algorithm if they are, for example, spying for Chinese government. So it will just make it a little bit harder to misuse AI.
That's interesting that you separate the corporate behavior and adoption versus the startups. Are you saying that the startups in all of Europe will be a little bit as a disadvantage? Because I would assume not just the mindset and the agility of the North American startup ecosystem, which is quite different culturally and historically speaking. But do you think now that the Europeans, the startup communities, are even more at a disadvantage and slow down against, the pretty aggressive growth of innovation coming from North America?
Yes. So first, UK will benefit from it. They will create their own laws which are designed to circumvent European EU Act or AI Act, and they will try to be a hub for, it's easier to train here. You can pre-train, and when you're ready to incubate in UK, you can export to the US pretty easy, and we will help you to come to the European Union. So I think London will benefit from this. And they already have mentioned it. If you're large enough and have enough funding, you might leave Europe right away with the money and go to US, Canada, but maybe to Dubai or other nations where you have just less law to experiment and to do at the beginning. If you're mature enough, you will have to do the European way. No way around, because most other nations will orientate their laws to European laws. It's like an API, and you need to be able to, speak the law code. Otherwise, you can't do business in Europe. Yeah. And to tap into the talent and the business, especially since we talk about B2B AI. Most AI is enterprise solutions. Not everything, but most of it. And to sell it, you need to comply. And the market, let's talk about what the real market is. It's digitizing the economy and the government. And they are the largest revenue makers of everything. So if AI is running business and if AI is running government, that's huge business. That's 1,000 times larger than we see today. And if you want to go into this market, sooner or later, you will have to comply with national laws. So as an American company, you could buy a German startup, which is compliant, and just buy them and roll them out. Or, you help them to bridge, I see a lot of, or other terms, entrepreneurs will figure out ways. It's just not making it easier for them to become a startup. It's just making it a little bit harder.
Yeah.
But I would say that law is not the largest bottleneck. It's still money. It's money, and there's not a single European market. So I still develop in AI, let's say, enterprise solution in Germany, and then I want to sell it in France. It's different VAT, it's different law. I want to go to Italy. I need a different sales team, different language for support. All this can be overcome with language models one day, but currently, you're targeting a lot of single markets, and that is the expensive part.
Okay, so let's get in a little bit further. That's an interesting comment, because we all know, as Europeans, there is the European Union, but we also know that it's not like the United States with the 50 states. There are different languages, different histories, different cultures. Yes, it's an open EU, and I think it's the right thing to do, but they did many years ago. But let's face it, it is still a federated kind of a continent with many, many local dynamic markets, and not as much integrated as it could be and should be to compete against the strong, the United States of the America. So with that in mind, do you see any trends or actually do you have suggestions for the listeners, what can be done to actually build a stronger ecosystem that actually works closer together? And let's face it, and I may not make friends here on this call, but even in Germany, sometimes I see that if I talk to an accelerator that's far in the south versus somebody way up north versus somebody in North Rhine-Westphalia or wherever, even the collaboration within Germany is more federated within the state itself. Not healthy, but I understand some of the economical reason. But if it's even that way within Germany, I mean, how can it ever merge together on a European continent on a much bigger level?
You go to the point, and that's why my wife, she had the idea so a couple of years ago, we started with the Berlin AI Week, because I started saying, okay, we have one ecosystem normally here. We started streamlined events along of rise of AI. First reason is I don't want competitive events the same day because it's taking away attention, but I wanted to give people coming to the conference from the US opportunity to tap into more than one network at the same time. And from this idea, we said we'll roll out this for all of Germany. And one day we will do this in Europe, maybe too. But for now, my focus and focus of others is to build bridges within the German ecosystem. Because I agree, what Bavaria is doing is a Bavarian thing. And then you go over to EPI, which is doing their own thing just for Heilbronn. And then you go to NRW and Hamburg. And in Hamburg, you have two fighting entities. Yeah. Like, they don't collaborate either. They're like, oh, we are older, but we are newer, we are cooler, we are richer. And they don't agree. They have like the personal bitch fight. Yeah. And that is where you stop. Like, you need collaboration, and you need people like me who say, like, I don't give a fuck on your bitch fights. We are one ecosystem, act like one. And I even swallow down pride and say, like, okay, I integrate competitor of mine to my conference. Mm-hmm. So there's a large media company, for example, who's doing AI events too. And they used to do it the same day. Now they do it later. But their event manager is coming to my conference for free, just to check out how we're doing. And I don't fear competition. I embrace and say, like, okay, you want to learn? You come here. We have open doors for everyone. And someone has to start doing this. You always need 1-2 people or initiatives going there and say, like, okay, we're all friends. Let's live like we talk and overcome these personal fences everyone is building.
Yeah, I know.
Also, we don't get down. And one solution in my book is we need German monopolies. We need national champions. We need, I call them Datenkartelle. So monopolies on data. If all of Germany's very strong, let's say, automotive industry would work as one ecosystem, no one in the world could compete with them. Because they have more data, more process, more integration. Everything is local. Everyone is, hey, we're neighbors at the end. Let's cooperate against the Chinese market.
Yeah.
Because the Chinese are doing this all the time. We just have to learn from them how to think our first. I mean, Americans already do this. Yes, Americans say, we are greatest nation. Well, Germany can be a great nation. We just have to be proud and self-aware about this and stop bitch fighting between the automotive companies. Just streamline this. And we can do this in AI, we can do this for automotive, we can do this for Maschinenbau, production companies, chemistries. We have so many strong industries, and they could collaborate more. So I believe to overcome all the obstacles, all these crises, all these very volatile problems we have, you have to become more resilient. That means having a very core foundation of, core basis you can build upon, and then be adaptive.
I can only second that, and I really honor you what you are doing. We are trying to do something similar here in Silicon Valley in behalf of Europe. There is obviously the very well-established German community, but then I also work with the European Commission, the Italian ecosystem, and such, and others. And it's the same thing over here. It's a melting pot. And you said earlier you went to school in the United States. I have been here for over 30 years. And what intrigued me the most in Silicon Valley is the mindset and the collaboration, the open collaboration. We're all smart. We're not giving away our IP, but we do thrive on collaboration and knowledge sharing and brainstorming. And then we go back and do our own thing. And we are fiercely competitive. And one doesn't exclude the other. And that is something the Europeans should learn much, much more. Collaboration doesn't necessarily exclude that you are successful on your own. You're actually being stronger.
So what was the challenge we have in Germany for AI is that AI is not high-level priority for society and for policymaking. So all politicians, they know by now, thanks to ChatGPT, okay, AI is existing. But then they delegated it very early back to the units, to the Staatssekretary, Secretary of States, etc., who are now in charge of this, and it's out of the mind of the federal minister because they have other things to do. They want to appease society. And if you just do appeasement for society, you cannot lead a society ahead. You cannot prepare them for the future. So whole of Europe is lacking a vision. Where do we want to head to? How can we rebuild society that it will be prosperous and safe in 30 years as well? We don't. We're lacking a vision. And so therefore we only do appeasement here and left and giving out more money and more money and more money to appease them. But we all know in our feeling, we have this high frustration. And you see this in Trump country a lot, but we see this in AfD country and others. I have so many Germans leaving Germany and going to the US or to Spain because they say like, this country is not doing anything for me anymore. It's taking my money, but it's giving a very poor service, poor infrastructure, high tax burden, and terrible bureaucracy. Why should I stay here?
The bureaucracy...
We're losing our talents.
Yeah, so the bureaucracy, I have to admit, is something that comes up for many, many, many years. I don't want to drift the conversation away from AI. I can only encourage anybody, all the listeners. Yes, there's so many reasons as an entrepreneur to come to the United States, especially in AI, come to Silicon Valley. Oh no, it's super expensive. But without any further comment, I as a European, I'm actually now, after all my years, I am very nervous and could actually imagine to live back in Europe, depending on the outcome of our big election by the end of the year. But that's a different story that I don't want to get into this call. But you mentioned something a minute ago, and that is China. I would say, obviously, in the United States, there's a very strong activity anti-China. It's very obvious, the CHIPS Act and all the restrictions and what have we. But I also recall that particularly Germany, on the export side, in your industries that you are very strong at, you are very heavily relying, or at least in the past, on China. Can you explain a little bit more about the relationship between China and Germany when it comes to AI activities? Because that is something that even on my end over here, it is not as visible as it is where I can, see on a daily basis what is happening between North America and China. And neither of them is good news.
So we're one level, what is China up to in AI, and then how is Germany related to this? Historical, Germany was earning good money with the rise of China because Germany is very good at helping you building infrastructures, machinery, tooleries, etc. And China was growing, so they need a lot of German tools, which was a good deal. Now the growth in China is stalling, and we don't sell as many cars as we would like to. And yes, we are independent. We're dependent. And I tell every company I'm talking to, imagine what happened with Russia from one day on. It was blacked out. It was out of SWIFT. You couldn't export anymore. You couldn't get to your team anymore. It was black. Please prepare your company for the same with China. Because in the moment China is invading Taiwan or Korea or Japan, whatever clusterfuck will happen, they will be on the other side. Because then we have to choose sides, and it will be the American one. It will be NATO. Even if Trump is there or not, we will be in part of Europe and NATO. Therefore, China will be the highest likely enemy. Even though one wants this and China doesn't want this, it can happen because history is repeating all over again. So therefore, always prepare yourself. How much business do you have in China? Second, China is the most strongest AI nation which we have. Not in terms of research and innovation, but in terms of adaptation. Already today, they're using the social score, they have Tiger and Fly, they have Skynet, they have Police Cloud, they collect every data they can collect. Like Google is doing it to sell you advertising, government is collecting this. So if you're reading 1984 by George Orwell, they are living and breathing it in real time. I mean, you're texting a message in real time, it's changed to the content government wants you to text. Yes, the way how you act in the internet, how you act in public, if you go over a red light, how you drive, everything is gathered in a huge score, which is even influencing the way if you can have babies, if you get a visa, if you get a new job. So they are running society within AI. For now, China is only focused domestic on AI. They have not started to export this heavily. They are already selling their surveillance technology to over 30 nations. And half of them might be European, like Hungary, etc. So they're selling the technology, but they have not really, like the Americans, going to the German market and trying to really conquer it. That's why we have breathing time. And in my book, I clearly state, do not buy Chinese technology. Do not. Because if we come to a war situation, Chinese are brutal and they will use their power in any ways to shut down our infrastructure, to manipulate our users, to shut down critical infrastructure, to stop production, to turn off the power grid. It's the easiest form of warfare. They don't have to send a single soldier. They just have to press a button and it's dark here. And they will use this power because Chinese are very smart people. They're ambitious and they're pragmatic. And therefore, as I always say, don't underestimate them. And in terms of AI, they are highly, highly powerful. They have similar capabilities like the Americans. And that's a warning. That's a clear warning.
Is there industry collaboration happening on a bigger scale between Europe or Germany and China, or is it as similar and almost abruptly stopped like between North America and China?
Their collaboration within the ecosystem in China is way higher. They use way more AI already. They use AI to rank even officials and policy members. 6 million members of the parties are part of the internal algorithm for Xi Jinping to go on the database and see how everyone else is performing. So they use it internally heavily. And they streamlining their own industry heavily with AI. You know, everything is linked and it's like a perfect dream for Industry 4.0, just with the dystopian side effect.
Yeah.
On technical level, they are not interlinked to the Europeans like the Americans and the Europeans. So we in Europe, we built most of our tech stack on American hyperscalers. So most of European infrastructure is running in either European or Americans. We do not have a lot of code written by the Chinese. Which we have is a lot of hardware produced by the Chinese.
Yeah.
That's the tricky part. I mean, they have, I think on the low level end of chips, they are the #1 producers of chips in all ways. And we need to learn how to circumvent this. What Biden was doing with the CHIPS Act is just playing chess a couple of years ahead. If China would stop delivering chips, nothing would go here anymore. Not the military stuff, but the rest wouldn't work. You know, not a single dishwasher you could repair without Chinese chips currently.
Yeah. I agree with you. I totally agree with the CHIPS Act. And I worked for Intel the last 6 years, so I have a little bit of some insights. I can only support what Biden, but also Intel and other companies are doing in putting manufacturing sites in all strategic European or Western countries. Intel is building one in Ohio, in Arizona, in Germany, obviously has been big time announced. We need independency from China, no doubt about it. I think the politicians and the industry has made a huge mistake over 20, 30 years to allow it to happen. And the same is with the independency of TSMC. I mean, that's a known fact. And I think we are on the right way, but you are correct. There is a buffer of 3 to 4 years before we actually have all these in place. And then the world looks a little bit different, maybe even more, and maybe even more. We'll see.
Reading recommendation for a book from Chris Miller called Chips War.
Oh,
it's not strong in AI, but it's good to understand AI because it's this predecessor level. And what Japan, Korea, and Taiwan did cost 100 billion investments in 10 years. So what Germany is doing is just a drop on the hot stone. Yeah. Germany did not understand the topic, and normally European Union needs the same budget like America is doing with the Chip Inflation Reduction Act, something like this, and invest 100 billion across Europe to build their own infrastructure.
Yeah.
Americans are smart. They do it the right way. Still, it will take 10 years until we can be kind of independent from Taiwan. Taiwan it's the black swan, which is swimming on the ocean.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring up that book. A week ago, 2 weeks ago, I was lecturing at a college here for students who are now graduating, and they're going into the job market. And there was a job fair and a conference around it. And based on my experiences in life, I was allowed to present, learning lessons and stuff. And one of the questions was, so what's your 2 favorite books? And I said, well, most recently, and I'm reading a lot of books, I always have, even as a child, but my most recent favorite books is a book called Zone to Win. It explains how big corporations should nurture innovation, because most of them have failed if you really look under the hood. But the second one is the chip war. And the chip war for me, and I read it when I was still at Intel towards the end. And it just came out like November a year ago. And I read it and was like, oh my gosh, not only it is a fascinating book about our industry and Silicon Valley, which is where I'm based, but I always keep telling the people, and I'm referring a lot back to this book, every European politician should read that book to understand how the semiconductor industry or the computer sector actually started fundamentally. Most people don't know it, because I ask people, what do you think how it started? And today, everybody's talking about, when we have the delegations coming over and the startups, and they're always repeating, well, Silicon Valley is not a place, it's a mindset. It's agility, it's, failure should be expected. We all have heard this now for so many years. I would assume the latest generation, they know this by now, but we're repeating all the things. We have to move on, right? And in this case, even myself did not know how exactly, at what moment, and what elements have started the boom of Silicon Valley and the entire industry. That book explains it all. I am not suggesting here that everybody needs to copycat it, because the history started 50, 60, 70 years ago, but there's so much learning of it. So I'm glad that you actually referred to that book as well.
Once you finish this book, you should read this, because this is building on top. So once you get the chip wars, which is the history,
okay,
this tells you the future.
Okay, so in that case, I am looking forward to seeing you at the Rise of AI, and then I expect that you hand signature with a comment, and then you give it to me personally.
You will get your unique special edition in hardcover.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
And the second book I can recommend, because you asked 2 books, it would be this one. It's Peter Zihey, The End of the World is Just the Beginning. And this explains really well why the United States is the best prepared continent for the next century.
Yeah.
Strategic.
Yeah.
Resources, no natural enemies, a lot of water, etc. And it's mapping it's telling the story which we have. Globalization is kind of stopping.
Yeah.
And takes a break, and it will reshuffle itself. and it's a very smart book. And Peter Zhe, he's a smart guy explaining you how just from looking at borders and maps, we can derive for the future. Best case is what Putin is doing. I read one book which told me 10 years before he will do what he's doing because he's forced to by history.
So what can we learn from each other? Like, what can the Europeans learn from the US in regards to AI? But in all fairness, because the conversation has to be on eye level, what can the US learn from Europe, in your opinion?
So one thing I would like to have is more Americans being present in Europe and also at, for example, the Rise of AI conference. So just by numbers in the past, I had way more Chinese coming over to Europe for exchange than American coming to Europe. So what Americans often have is this thing, oh, we are great, we don't need to learn.
Yeah, that is true.
So, but what you can learn from Europe is how to structure society more peaceful. Also to take the wealth. I have one chapter in my book about not taxing the super rich, but demanding super rich people. And super rich starts with 100 million net value assets. To take responsibility for society. So I literally say Mark Zuckerberg is not so super rich because he's the smartest guy, because society let him be rich. He built on the education system, he tapped into the talent pool, he tapped into working administration, and that made him so wealthy in times of the trend. And it's now time for the super wealthy to reinvest into technology and society. We have 150 million Americans who need to be re-educated using AI.
Mm-hmm.
Someone has to pay for this. Someone has to bring in the knowledge. So I would like that Americans learn how they take more responsibility for society, for the neighbors, for the people poor down the street, and not giving just donation, but being part of a strong society, which is preparing every generation again for the next generation. Not only thinking selfish for having another yacht, having another house, having, more boarding schools and being, isolating yourself. We don't need more gated communities. We need more cultural exchange. You are this amazingly melting pot and you have overcome a lot of racial biases, by the way, which Europe still has to learn.
Yeah.
So Europe has to learn, how can I build a larger ecosystem tapping into all these cultural differences, all these migration backgrounds? How can I enable first-time migration people to become billionaires in one generation? Because America did this really well, letting people who just come in hungry and foolish, living out their dreams.
That's what makes this place so unique. I have to admit, I'm living it myself. That's why I didn't go back. It's interesting, but it's also concerning. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier that, how can I say that delicately? A certain amount of very entrepreneurial startup entrepreneurs deciding to leave Europe and come to the United States. That is a brain loss that Europe needs to try to prevent. And I see the same trends in the research and postdocs, PhDs. Instead of using their knowledge that they gained in this incredible institutional educational setup of universities in Europe, or in this case in Germany, they come over here because half of them, statistically speaking, they go into corporations because they make so much money that there's not, I don't think there's a research institute that can even afford it, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? And it's not all about money. I think it's about enabling people to follow their visions and allow them to turn their knowledge into profitable research stuff. Look at Stanford, and like the chip war book says it, quite nicely. You started something with semiconductor and military and government funded, and then all of a sudden you see a Stanford and a Berkeley and other universities in Silicon Valley. You have the famous Page Mill Road and Central Road with more venture capital than anywhere on the planet, and you have an open mindset for entrepreneurship. That's the perfect melting pot.
So, giving you an example where it's stuck in Europe, we all know DARPA is great. So the German government learned, okay, DARPA is good, we want to do it too, and they called it Sprint, Sprungagentur.
Okay.
So they assigned a 300 million budget, and what's happening with it? It's nothing, because now this agency to support leapfrogging technologies has a budget, but they comply with German law, which means there's a certain cap on salaries. And you do not get the brightest people for 80,000 a year. So there's the use case, a friend of mine, young kid, very smart, 17 years old. He has no two options. He could work for a large American corporate because, they pay him right away because he's super smart, 300,000 euros without a college degree, just because he's great in deep learning and LMNs. Or he could take a Azubi job, duales Studium. So he could work for a German corporation for 1,400 a month, and he would not learn anything. That is a problem.
That is
a bright and visionary. The German market is very hard unless you go to, for example, Berlin. In Berlin, you find smart people, you find investors. Within Germany, Berlin itself is not Germany. So there are these beacons of hope where you can go your way. Still, our pond in Europe is way smaller than the American, but we also have less sharks. And I personally like to swim in a pond where the sharks are not that big like in the US.
Yeah, fair enough. So what might be a unique European way for AI?
So I call it AI made in Germany, and I would like to have first AI which is trustworthy, which is reliable, and which is sustainable. And if we can establish standards how we build trustworthy systems, like our trustworthy cars, people will buy it. There are always people who take reliability over speed, or over price. And I think this is our sweet spot. Also, I believe what we can come up earlier than the Americans is collaboration. And especially in the industry, if we figure out, for example, the automotive sector to streamline the OEMs, like BMW, like Volkswagen, like Mercedes-Benz, with their suppliers, who often supply to all of these clients, and you let AI tap into it to win efficiency, to increase production cycles, I think this could be a large competitive advantage at a certain point.
So in a nutshell, and I agree with you, in a nutshell, the Germans or the Europeans have to look at their core individual value system, whatever that may be, and then also look at your industrial and know-how uniqueness on a global level. And around these two parameters, there may be others, but around these two core parameters, they should define their own AI strategy. Is that an accurate summary?
Yes, I would say the B2C game is in American hands. The B2B is the game we need to win now. And I do not believe Americans will win it, but the Chinese could win it if they are faster. Because they will provide a lot of cheap, affordable, reliable solutions too in the hardware sector. And hardware is always a Trojan horse for the software you need. And we speak about the physical one, building houses, building bridges, building ports, building cars, building computers. All this will be infused with AI. And this AI needs to be European. The smartphone, it will be American. It will be Apple. It will be Android. Americans are building the better looking systems, the faster systems, usability. It's great by Americans. Americans are really great in selling, marketing, usability. But if I build a reliable system for my power plant, I don't care so much about usability. I care way more about quality, reliability, and trust. Yeah, I think there is a sweet spot, and it's a huge sweet spot. And I think this will work in Europe too. I do not believe that every European nation will be an AI powerhouse. I do not think that Poland will be an AI powerhouse or south of Italy. But maybe the northern Italy will be very much streamlining with north of France and with the south of Germany, with Austria and Switzerland in the middle, and they will collaborate on a level which will be unique. And just imagine all the talents and resources of Europe pooling together, like CERN. But I always say I need something like CERN for AI. Put the 1,000 of the brightest Europeans in the same campus and let them figure it out. We have the smart people here, and money is not the incentive. Just give them enough money they can pay back their mortgage and send their children to school. That's what they need.
Yeah.
Don't make them rich. Give them a meaning in life. Give them for something greater to work for. I've seen the movie Oppenheimer by Christopher Nolan. Great movie.
Yeah.
Why don't we do this for super AI, just the European way?
Interesting. In closing, I know the rise of AI is coming up. You're counting the days. What do you envision is the biggest surprise outcome when 200 people come together and you put these brightest people on stage? Do you have a glimpse of a particular surprise that we may need to be prepared for, being it a certain trend or size or a momentum or whatever it may be?
I think everything said was already said everywhere. So creativity is combining known knowledge in a new context. What I would wish for is that more of society is accepting the military as a driver for innovation. And especially the Germans have their distance to the military. Mm-hmm. And US, China, France, everyone is the military, the innovation driver. Look at Israel. Israel is super strong because they integrate the military and the startup ecosystem really well. We need to do this too. So for the first time for, I would say, German-English AI conference, I've put the highest ranked general of the German forces on stage to address 200 people in the room to tell them what he needs to overcome this.
Oh, interesting.
I put 2 members of government there, not to tell us how great they are. They are not, as a strategy, to tell our society, our people in the streams, what do they need to overcome all these barriers. I want that there is a 2-way direction, 1 to many, many to 1 to exchange. And therefore, I don't know what it will be. But if everyone will get out and say, first, we will make it. Second, I have more ideas, I have more contact, I have more resources now. Let's do it. I will see in a couple of months to years later what the real impact was.
Excellent. That was a nice closing statement. And Fabian, thank you very much for taking the time for this podcast. I am very much looking forward to see you in Berlin for Rise of AI. And what is that on your shirt? You want to mention it for a second?
So everyone who reads this and is sending me a LinkedIn message decoding it, they might get a free book from me personally signed.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I
write it out, text me on LinkedIn, and then I will send you a free copy for the first 10 people doing it.
Excellent. Hey, thank you very much, Fabian. This was a very, very interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for listening until the end. Call to action is visit the conference, buy my book, and just add me on LinkedIn. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you.